This is Martin Giles of the Guildford Dragon News, and this morning I'm in the Liberal Democrats campaign office for the general election on December the 12th, and I'm with, of course, Zoe Franklin, the Liberal Democrat candidate. Good morning, Zoe.
Morning, Martin.
Right, let's start off. I think this is a wide open election here in Guildford, unusually so. Surrey normally is solid blue, as you know. I mean, I know we can remember the last Lib Dem victory, but nonetheless. Now, Anne Milton's decision to stand will split the Conservative vote, I suspect, and Guildford is a Remain constituency. The Green candidate has withdrawn. The People's Vote nomination is yours. This election's yours to lose, isn't it?
So I don't like to make assumptions, but it is certainly a fantastic opportunity for myself and the Liberal Democrats to potentially win and get a Liberal, progressive, pro-European MP in Parliament for Guildford and Cranley.
So what's your analysis? What are you targeting? What kind of voters are you hoping to persuade to support you?
So we are obviously reaching out to Remainers across the spectrum. That's obviously a pretty key part of the campaign. But we're wanting to reach out really to anybody who just wants change, wants a fairer, greener and stronger community here in Guildford, and we're talking to lots of those across Guildford and Cranley.
Okay. Now, on the radio this morning I heard that the Lib Dems, or at least some of them, regard climate emergency as even more important than Brexit. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is we are having this election because of Brexit, but for me, climate emergency has to be absolutely central to the campaign because it's just that, it's an emergency and we need to be tackling it right now. And so yeah, it's one of the core things I'm talking to people about, and we'll be asking people to look at me, look at our policies and vote in that way.
Okay, now lots of politicians have accepted it's an emergency. They've used that very word. Yeah. Here in Guildford, the council has accepted it's an emergency. Surrey County Council the same. I don't sense we're dealing with it as an emergency. You know, it's not like a wartime situation where special actions are being taken. Don't you think this requires real emergency action from the government, not just for details like improving public recycling or thinking twice before going on holiday by a flight? It needs them to actually start making new laws, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And you know, you'll be unsurprised to hear from me that I think the government has done a poor job. It's been dragging its feet on this, and we need the government to start urgently tackling the climate emergency. And the climate emergency is something that all of us need to tackle together. That's government, that is people, that is business, but the government has to lead the way. Sometimes we have to, when you're in politics, make tough decisions and tough calls and say to people, we need to have change, and that means we're going to have to ask you to do particular things.
So what kind of measures can you think of?
Yeah. So for me, in terms of the local picture, one of the things that I really think we need to be looking at very carefully is when we build, we have to do it not just in a sustainable way for right now. We have to look ahead, and we have to be building properties and homes and businesses that are fit for the 21st century and beyond in terms of utilising solar technology, other renewables. We have to move away from using fossil fuels. It just has to happen. There's no dragging our feet on that. We need to get away from that as soon as possible.
Okay, well, I think there are some questions how we manage that, because more houses normally mean more cars, means more pollution. It's just the contrary to tackling the climate emergency.
You can build in a way that encourages people to get out of their cars, and infrastructure is absolutely key when we are building anything, whether that is places for new businesses or homes themselves. People want to make changes in their lives. People recognise that there is a climate emergency and want to change the way they transport themselves around. But at the moment, our buses, our trains are not working in a way that encourages people to get out of their cars. And so that has to be tackled. That's a massive step that I want to be part of making happen.
Now, I want to get onto housing a bit later, but doesn't what you just said mean that we should be building so that people don't have to get into their cars to reach the services they require? And doesn't that mean that they should be there should be more focus on developing within towns rather than in remote sites like Wisley, for instance?
So you've obviously got to strike a balance, and the whole issue of building on the green belt is very challenging. So here in Guildford we have 89% green belt, But we're a successful, thriving town, as is Cranley as well, and they're in Waverley Borough. And what that means is people want to live here. We have a high housing need, which we need to then work towards fulfilling. And so that is going to mean that there may need to be some development on Greenbelt. But, this is the big but, we have to really promote the building on brownfield first. But you can't put everything in the town, because that equally starts to make it unsustainable, because people want quality of life. So it's a balance to be had. And when we are building outside of the town centre, and that may be on brownfield sites or any other site, actually the infrastructure that is put in needs to be thought out very, very carefully. And I was down looking at the Dunsfold development earlier in the week, and one of the things that impresses me about it is the way that it brings together businesses, places of work, with community hub, with housing, and the question is always going to be over the transport, but it's looking at innovative ways of tackling that transport as well.
But it's hard to imagine how, for instance, a new occupants in Wisley settlement wouldn't think, well, we need a car to get around here, isn't it?
So that's a conversation that actually I, as the MP, would be having with Surrey County Council and Guildford Borough Council, is how do we make, if Wisley is necessary, how do we make the transport sustainable, environmentally friendly, and mean that people can have options other than getting in a car? Okay,
I'll come back to housing, but as you said, Brexit is the reason that we're having this election now, and you're an ardent Remainer, not surprisingly. What do you fear for Guildford if we leave the EU?
So there's quite a number of things, and I'll just pick a couple. I've spoken to businesses who work regularly with Europe, and they are deeply concerned about how they trade, how they move their goods around Europe. They are worried about how their staff who are from Europe will actually be able to come and live here, whether that will be something that's possible. You look at our health services, huge numbers of people who care for our elderly in the social care sector are from Europe. If they can't move freely over here and come and live and work, how do we look after people in social care? Our nurses, many are from Europe. But
we wouldn't need to have free movement to allow people that were coming for specific roles like the health service, would we?
Well, I'd just make the point that actually the cap that the government wants to put on in terms of salary is actually higher than a nurse's salary. So if you wanted to come in from outside the UK to work in the NHS, the salary cap is a real problem.
But you could have a policy, it doesn't have to be the Conservative policy, it could be a policy that would still allow the movement we wanted for such sectors as the health service, which everyone agrees, we owe a debt to these people that come and help us, there's no doubt about that. But we wouldn't need to be free movement for everybody, would it?
But free movement of people is such a fantastic thing, because actually at the moment, people have the ability to freely move within Europe without having to worry about the passport. They can literally get a call because of business and they can go that afternoon. If we have to have visas and all that kind of stuff, that's going to be a significant issue. People can travel because of the EU. Students can travel and be part of the Erasmus scheme. They can study in Europe. It's unsurprising, Martin. I think being part of Europe makes us stronger. It's a fantastic opportunity. It makes us part of a really positive partnership.
Okay, business visitors have always been allowed from across the whole world, so I don't think actually that's a very strong argument. But what I would like to ask you about is, what about the rate of net immigration? Because at the moment it's around 275,000 a year. Do you think the country literally has space for at that level? Is it sustainable, that policy?
What you need to think about is the fact that for a good number of years, the government has had the ability to know, to put some limitations on it, but they've chosen not to. We have the right to have the control of our borders while being in the EU. I still believe that immigration and free movement of people is a really positive thing for this country. Yeah.
Okay, but most of those numbers are not coming from the EU at the moment. They're coming from other parts of the world. So what would you do about that?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Sorry, so at the moment, of that 275,000, I think it's around 60 to 70,000, or it could be slightly higher, coming from the EU. Mm-hmm. Most of them are coming from other parts of the world.
Right.
What would be your policy on immigration from those areas?
So we have an immigration policy right now. and I know this because I have friends who have moved back here from overseas, and it has been incredibly difficult for them to move over here. And I would like to see changes to make, the phrase often used is a hostile environment for people coming from overseas, and I would like to see that changed. I think that people moving from across the world and from Europe here to be part of our communities, part of our working environment, is a really positive thing. And remember, we can also go overseas and work, and that, you have reciprocal gain.
But what you're saying is likely to increase the numbers, isn't it? Because you're saying the moment it's hostile, we need to make it actually easier for these people to come.
Yeah, if someone has a skill set where they want to be here and be involved, currently they have to jump through a huge number of hurdles to get it. It's incredibly expensive. I would like to see that changed. I would also like to have seen the government put in some of the controls that Europe said we could. Immigration is a positive thing, Martin.
Okay. And what about the infrastructure necessary to go with that? Because obviously, the higher the population, the bigger the infrastructure is required. Especially at the moment in a health service, where it is a lengthy wait sometimes to get the health service you require, be it in the GP surgery or the A&E.
But that is down to the government failing to fund our NHS properly and to failing to put in the infrastructure that is needed. It's not because people from Europe are coming here. It is because of government failure for a decade or more.
So you think a significantly increased population for the foreseeable future is sustainable?
But we're not talking about a significantly increased population, because as you probably are aware, when people come in, we're also having people moving away to other places.
Well, I'm talking about the net figure though, 275,000 a year.
Right.
So I mean that's a town the size of Newcastle every year. So it is quite a significant number.
Yeah, and I am happy with the fact that if we are...
Okay, now let's go on to the local plan. We've got a controversial local plan that's been adopted in Guildford. It's been adopted as the dying twitch of the local borough of the last local borough council. Caroline Reeves, the Liberal Democrat leader at the time, and now the council leader, was the only Liberal Democrat to vote in favour of the local plan. What do you think about the local plan?
The first thing I would absolutely say is I agree with you. The whole fact it was pushed through immediately prior to the local elections by the Conservative council, and it was wrong. It's based on a Conservative policy that nationally that I don't think puts people and local businesses first. And for me, I've always said over the years, and I was a councillor for many years, I've always said we need the right development in the right places with the right infrastructure. And so for me, the Liberal Democrat-led council is now having to work within the parameters set for them by the Conservative administration. And I know that they will do everything within their powers to make sure that this local plan works for the people of Guildford. Okay,
and now you talked about housing shortage before. We think we've got about between 2 and 3, probably approaching 3,000 people on the housing list. I haven't been able to get a clear answer from the council, and you may know, whether that represents 3,000 people or 3,000 homes required. I suspect it's the latter. Do you know?
I believe it's 3,000 families on the housing register.
Okay, or it could be single people, but it's 3,000 homes required. Yeah. Okay, but we're actually planning to build between 10 and 14,000 homes. So obviously there are other people that don't require homes, that are council homes, but nonetheless we're building far more than we require for our local needs, aren't we, under the local plan? Yeah,
and the 40% buffer shouldn't, in my view, shouldn't have been in there, and that was a failing of Conservative policy.
Okay, but should we be building so many more homes than we need for our own our current population?
So I'm not sure whether you're asking me about the total or whether you're still asking me about the homes for people.
Well, even 10,000. Even 10,000 is a lot more than we seem to require to sustain the necessary accommodation for the current population of Guildford Borough.
So if I could take it back to what I would do if I was the MP, I would be going back to national government and talking through all of these things. You know, as the MP, you have the responsibility of being the advocate for Guildford, and if in discussions with the local council was being told that this is over and above what is necessary for Guildford and it's not sustainable and it doesn't work, then I would be going back and I'd be having conversations with the government. I am not on the council. I am there to be the representative in Parliament and talking to government about the issues that face Guildford.
Okay. And would one of the things you raised, you said that you didn't think it was right, it was pushed through right before the election. And actually that's against normal practice, it seems to me. You don't normally hamstring the next administration coming in, but that's exactly what's happened. So would you be trying to persuade a change of policy that couldn't happen in the future?
I mean, the Liberal Democrat team were quite clear before the election that they didn't want it to be done before the local elections, and it was still pushed through. It is always difficult during PERDA. The rules are such that technically I believe that it was allowed to go through. In my view, it shouldn't have been done. It should have been when the new administration was in.
So even if it was legally permissible, you think morally it was wrong?
I'm very uncomfortable with the fact it went through.
Okay. Would you have voted for the local plan if you had been sitting as a councillor at the time?
I think I'd have probably abstained.
As some of the other Lib Dems did? Okay. Now, still on local planning, we've got a very or widely unpopular scheme to redevelop the railway station. Where do you stand on this? Because it's obviously a very controversial issue. We know that the council voted unanimously across the political spectrum against the proposal, but one planning inspector comes down to Guildford and gives it the green light, and now we're about to see, which will be the biggest in mass development building we have seen in this town, and it will affect lots of different views and our townscape. What do you think about it?
Well, for starters, it makes me deeply uncomfortable that it can be forced upon us.
Uncomfortable or angry?
Yeah, angry. I'm not happy that it can be forced upon us. You know, a lot of people talk about what it will look like, and it is not the right development in that location as I would see it. And I think that has to be around, if you're the MP, being there advocating for Guildford, being part of the conversation very early on in the discussions to make sure that it ends up being that you do everything you can to try and get the right development in the right place. And it makes me very unhappy.
Right, so let's imagine you've been elected and it's now in December. What are you going to do about this?
So I will need to be getting some advice on that, because I personally don't know yet what power I will have in terms of planning and things like that. But it's ultimately about having conversations, building relationships with the people who have that ability to make change, and to build those relationships, have conversations and get the best outcomes for Guildford. But
Network Rail is one of the partners in this scheme, and they're still publicly owned. So the politicians could pull the plug on this if they wanted to, still.
Perhaps they can, in which case I need to be having those conversations in Westminster.
Okay. Well, I think that's covered quite a wide range of subjects there, Zoe. Thank you very much for your time.
That's a pleasure, Martin.